The first rays of dawn filtered through the dense forest canopy, casting a golden shimmer across the dewy grass of the pack's sacred clearing. The air was crisp, tinged with the scent of pine and wildflowers, and the distant cries of wolves heralded the beginning of the day. But for Isabella, the morning held no serenity. She awoke with a start, her chest heaving, beads of sweat clinging to her forehead. Her eyes darted to the clock, her heart sank. She had overslept the mating ceremony, the most important ritual for an Omega in the pack. Every pack member knew that attending or missing, it could shape her destiny. And now, because of her stepsister Valeria, who had cunningly ensured she would remain asleep, Isabella's name was already a topic of whispered gossip. Rising in a flurry of panic, she threw on her ceremonial cloak. Her hands trembling. Each step she took toward the clearing seemed heavier than the last, weighed down by the eyes she imagined judging her. As she arrived, breathless and flushed, the pack's murmurs grew louder. Some voices were curious, others mocking. Whispers carried like wildfire. She missed the ceremony! How careless! Her stepsister must have done this. Valeria stood at the edge of the gathering, a smug smile curling her lips, her eyes glinting with satisfaction. She had orchestrated Isabella's humiliation flawlessly, ensuring that the young Omega would face the pack's scrutiny at the worst possible moment. But Isabella's humiliation was tempered with something else, something that Valeria could never foresee: determination. From the raised stone platform, the Alpha King observed silently. His gaze swept over the pack and finally settled on Isabella. He noticed the way she stood, despite her embarrassment, her spine straight, her head held high. Most who were humiliated would shrink into themselves, bowing their head to shame. But not her. There was a quiet strength in her, an unspoken defiance that piqued his interest. Her presence radiated something unexpected: resilience. Isabella could feel the weight of every eye on her, yet she refused to falter. With each step, she reminded herself that her worth was not determined by ceremonies or her stepsister's cruelty. Inside her, a fire ignited, a fire that would not be snuffed out by whispers, judgment, or even the looming scrutiny of the pack's alpha. As the ceremony continued, Isabella's gaze kept returning to the alpha. There was an intensity in his eyes, a silent acknowledgement of her struggle, and perhaps even admiration for the courage she displayed under pressure. Her cheeks warmed, not from shame this time, but from something more dangerous, something thrilling. The feeling of being noticed by the one man whose power could change her life forever. She knew this was only the beginning. Valeria's betrayal had set a chain of events in motion, one that would test loyalty, courage, and the hidden strength she had always kept buried. Somewhere deep within the forest, shadows moved and secrets stirred. The pack would soon discover that Isabella's absence from the ceremony was far from the end of her story. It was merely the opening act of a far larger game, one involving love, power, intrigue, and dangerous choices that could alter the fate of the entire pack. And as the sun rose higher, casting long golden beams through the trees, Isabella took a deep, steadying breath. She would not let humiliation define her. She would rise. She would fight. And unknowingly, she had already captured the attention of the most powerful alpha the pack had ever known. The clearing had quieted, but the echoes of gossip lingered like an invisible storm, swirling around Isabella with every step she took. The pack's members whispered to each other, their voices sharp with judgment and curiosity. "Did you see her? She dared to arrive late. Her stepsister must have planned this. But why would she risk the Alpha's wrath?" Every word, every glance felt like a dagger aimed at her back, yet Isabella walked forward with her head held high. She had no intention of showing fear. Valeria, sensing the power she had wielded, moved closer to the center of the gathering. Her smug smile widening, she whispered cruelly to those around her, exaggerating Isabella's failure as if it were proof of weakness. But her words fell on deaf ears, except for the Alpha. From his throne-like perch, the Alpha King observed everything. His gaze was sharp, measuring, and strangely approving. He noticed Isabella's every movement, the subtle tremor in her hands, the way her eyes darted to avoid the judgmental stares, and then the way she lifted her chin despite the shame. Most Omegas would have crumbled, most would have retreated into the shadows, but she did not. There was a strength there, buried beneath embarrassment. That drew him in, a spark that demanded recognition. Isabella found a quiet corner near the trees, attempting to catch her breath and calm her racing heart. The forest seemed to lean in around her. The rustle of leaves and distant bird calls, somehow amplifying the tension in her chest. She could still hear the murmurs of the pack, and worse, she could feel Valeria's triumphant gaze boring into her. But then, unexpectedly, the Alpha descended from his platform with deliberate steps. The clearing fell silent as the pack instinctively parted to let him through. Each movement of his was commanding, deliberate, radiating power. Isabella's heart pounded, her breath catching in her throat. She tried to steady herself, yet the closeness of the Alpha made her pulse race in ways she had never felt. He stopped before her, his gaze locking onto hers with intensity. "Isabella," he said, his voice low and commanding, yet not unkind. "Tell me, why were you late?" Isabella swallowed, feeling the weight of every eye on her. Her voice trembled slightly, but she forced it steady. "My stepsister prevented me from waking up in time, Alpha. It wasn't my choice." The Alpha's eyes narrowed slightly as he studied her. He seemed to sense the truth beneath her words. The anger, the determination, and the quiet courage she tried to mask. He inclined his head slightly, as if acknowledging a silent promise, that he saw her, truly saw her, even when the rest of the pack was ready to condemn her. Valeria's expression shifted subtly from triumph to uncertainty. For the first time, she realized that the Alpha's attention was not on her, but on the one she had tried to humiliate. Fear and envy flickered in her eyes. But Isabella felt no satisfaction from her stepsister's discomfort. Instead, she felt a growing sense of resolve. She would not be the victim. She would not let anyone define her value, not Valeria, not the pack. And not even the Alpha, though his piercing gaze sent shivers down her spine. Whispers in the pack intensified after that encounter, spreading like wildfire. Questions arose. Why did the Alpha speak to her? Does he favor her over others? Has he noticed her strength? Every whisper added to the growing tension. And Isabella realized that this was only the beginning. Something in the air had shifted. The game had begun, and she was now at its center. As the day wore on, Isabella found herself navigating a labyrinth of curiosity, envy, and hidden intentions. Every glance from a pack member could be a test. Every word could hide a trap. And while fear whispered at the edges of her mind, another emotion, unexpected, dangerous, and intoxicating, crept in whenever she thought of the Alpha. He had noticed her. He had seen the strength she tried to hide, and she knew, deep down, that this was no ordinary connection. Something was stirring. Something powerful that neither the pack nor her stepsister could control. The shadows of secrets and the tension of rivalry hung thick in the air, foreshadowing a chain of events that would test loyalty, courage, and hearts in ways Isabella had never imagined. By nightfall, Isabella retreated to the edge of the forest, alone with her thoughts. The moonlight painted silver streaks across her face, reflecting both fear and determination. She had survived the whispers, but she knew that the true trials were only beginning. And somewhere, deep in the darkness, forces she could not yet see were already moving, shaping a destiny intertwined with power, love, and danger beyond anything she had ever known. The forest had settled into an uneasy calm, as if it too was holding its breath, anticipating the events that were quietly unfolding. Isabella walked along a narrow path, her cloak brushing the dew-covered grass. Her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, replaying the humiliation of the morning and the subtle yet undeniable attention of the Alpha King. Every step she took toward the hidden grove felt deliberate, as if the forest itself guided her. The pack had dispersed after the ceremony, but the whispers had not ceased. They lingered like shadows in her mind. Yet amid the tension, there was a strange thrill, a pulse of something unfamiliar. She had felt the Alpha's eyes on her, probing, calculating, as though he could see the strength she tried to conceal. That look, intense and unwavering, left her both unsettled and mesmerized. Meanwhile, high on the stone platform where the Alpha often observed his pack, King Alaric remained motionless, a predator in stillness. His mind replayed Isabella's every move from the ceremony, the way her shoulders stiffened with defiance, the flash of anger and determination in her eyes, the faint quiver of vulnerability beneath her courage. Most Omegas would have cowered, would have bowed their heads in shame, but she had done the opposite. She had walked into a storm of judgment and emerged, if not unscathed, then resolute. That was curiosity enough for him. Alaric descended from his perch with silent, confident strides. The clearing, now quieter in the aftermath of the ceremony, seemed to react to his presence. Animals paused, birds froze mid-flight, and even the wind seemed to shift direction. As though acknowledging his power, Isabella, unaware of his proximity, finally stopped at the edge of a small pond, the moonlight glinting off the water, illuminating her features in a delicate silver glow. The Alpha's voice broke the silence, low and commanding, yet with an undercurrent of intrigue. "Isabella." She startled, her heart leaping. Slowly she turned, eyes wide. There he was, the Alpha King, his presence overwhelming yet magnetic. "Alpha, she began, but words failed her. Alaric studied her, his sharp gaze tracing the lines of her face, the subtle tension in her posture. "Do you understand the weight of what you missed today?" he asked, his voice neither cruel nor gentle, but charged with authority. "Yes," Isabella whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "My stepsister." She trailed off, unwilling to fully name the betrayal. Alaric's eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of understanding crossing his features. "I see. And yet you came. You faced the pack knowing they would judge you. That takes courage, Isabella, more than most possess." Her heart thudded painfully in her chest. Courage, strength. Words she had never thought of herself, yet spoken by him, they ignited something deep inside, something dangerous, thrilling, and intoxicating. "You intrigue me," he said, stepping closer. Each of his movements was deliberate, confident, exuding authority and command. Most Omegas would have fled after such humiliation. You did not. Why? Isabella met his gaze, her defiance returning, mingling with a growing sense of attraction she could not deny. "Because I will not be defined by my stepsister, nor by the pack, nor by anyone." For a moment, the forest fell into pure silence, the tension between them almost tangible. Alaric's gaze softened, just slightly, but the intensity never wavered. He could see her hidden fire, the strength that most overlooked, the determination that she herself barely understood. And he knew that she was far from ordinary. "Very well," he said finally, his tone still commanding, yet with a strange warmth beneath it. "We will see how far your strength truly goes." Isabella felt her pulse quicken. There was danger in his words, an unspoken promise of challenges and tests. But she also felt a thrill she had never known, an electric, magnetic pull toward a man whose power was unmatched and whose curiosity seemed now firmly entwined with her fate. As Alaric turned to leave, the shadows in the forest seemed to shift, whispering secrets only the night could hold. Isabella's heart raced, and she knew this encounter was only the beginning. The Alpha's interest was dangerous, intoxicating, and inevitable. And as she watched him disappear into the darkness, she realized her life had already begun to change, entwined with power, desire, and peril in ways she could never have imagined. The pack had returned to the rhythm of daily life, but for Isabella, nothing felt ordinary anymore. Every corner of the clearing seemed to hold eyes that lingered just a moment too long, whispers that carried more venom than concern. She could feel it in the way some pack members glanced at her, curiosity mixed with suspicion, admiration shadowed by envy. Her stepsister, Valeria, was especially relentless, her presence like a shadow that refused to disappear. From the moment the Alpha King had acknowledged her, Isabella had been unable to escape the subtle shifts in the pack's dynamics. Wolves she had known for years now treated her with cautious attention, some with hostility. Their murmurs followed her. The Alpha noticed her. "What does that mean? Do you think she'll rise above her station?" Every word felt like a blade, yet another reason to sharpen her resolve. Valeria, sensing her influence over the pack waning, intensified her scheming. She would not allow Isabella to rise in favor, not when her own ambition burned so brightly. She spread rumors about Isabella's supposed weaknesses, weaving stories of incompetence and betrayal, hoping to turn even the most loyal pack members against her. But with each attempt, Isabella's calm defiance only grew. She refused to retaliate openly. Her strength lay in her silence. in the way she carried herself despite the constant attacks. Alaric, the Alpha King, watched all of this unfold from his elevated position, silent yet intensely observant. His piercing gaze followed Isabella through every interaction. Every subtle confrontation. He noticed the flicker of anger in her eyes when Valeria insulted her, the way she refused to break under pressure, the tiny, defiant gestures most would miss. There was something raw and unyielding in her spirit. Something that called to him in a way that few ever had. During the midday gathering, Isabella moved through the clearing, her heart steady, despite the tension thickening around her. Pack members offered nods of respect, some tentative smiles, and some wary glares. She noticed Valeria's gaze, sharp and calculating, following her like a hawk ready to strike. But Isabella's mind was focused elsewhere, on the Alpha King. A sudden hush fell over the clearing. Alaric had approached, moving through the pack with effortless authority. Each step he took commanded attention, yet his eyes never left Isabella. When he stopped before her, the forest seemed to hold its breath. "Walk with me," he said, his voice low, commanding, yet threaded with an unspoken invitation. Isabella's pulse quickened, but she obeyed, following him along the edge of the forest. Shadows stretched long beneath the trees, and the wind whispered secrets she could not yet understand. Alaric's presence was overwhelming. Every motion radiated control and power. Yet there was something almost tender in the way he looked at her now. "You are resilient," he said, his gaze holding hers. "Most Omegas would have crumbled under Valeria's machinations, yet here you stand." Isabella's throat tightened. I will not allow her to control me," she admitted softly. "Not my destiny." "Not my life." Alaric inclined his head slightly, his eyes darkening with intrigue. "Good. You should never allow anyone to dictate your worth. But understand this. In this pack, power is watched, tested, and claimed. And now, more than ever, you are under scrutiny." The words sent a thrill through her. Danger and excitement danced together in her chest. To survive the pack, and Alaric's attention, would require cunning, bravery, and the ability to navigate treacherous currents she had never faced before. They walked in silence for a few moments, the tension between them crackling like electricity. Isabella felt the pull of something dangerous yet intoxicating, an unspoken connection to the Alpha King that both frightened and thrilled her. Every glance, every subtle gesture seemed to hold layers of meaning. And she found herself struggling to remain composed. "You intrigue me," Alaric said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not because of your beauty, but because of what you hide beneath it." Strength, defiance, courage, these are rare qualities in an Omega. Isabella's heartbeat accelerated. His words were like fire, igniting a desire she could neither ignore nor fully understand. And in that moment, she realized that surviving Valeria's schemes was no longer enough. If she wanted to secure her place, and perhaps her heart, she would need to master the dangerous game unfolding around her. As they returned to the pack, Isabella felt every eye on them, every whisper following her steps. She understood now that a tension, once unwanted, could become a weapon, and that her path with the Alpha King was only just beginning. Somewhere in the shadows, threats lurked, Schemes unfolded and alliances shifted. And Isabella, caught between betrayal and desire, would have to navigate it all, lest she lose everything she had yet to gain. Night had fallen over the pack's territory, blanketing the forest in a quiet, silver darkness. The moon hung low, casting pale light that filtered through the swaying branches, illuminating patches of dew on the grass. For Isabella, the night was both a refuge and a trap, a place where she could finally breathe, yet also a place where danger and desire coiled together like predators in the shadows. Since the morning of the ceremony, life had become a delicate dance of attention and avoidance. Every step she took, every glance she exchanged, carried weight. The pack watched her constantly, her reputation a fragile thread pulled taut by Valeria's whispers and the Alpha King's piercing gaze. Yet it was precisely this tension that led Isabella to the hidden grove at the edge of the forest, a secluded place few dared to visit. Here she could be alone, or at least alone enough to think clearly. But she was not alone. A shadow moved silently between the trees, fluid and purposeful. Isabella's pulse quickened as she recognized the familiar, commanding presence. Alaric, the Alpha King, emerged from the darkness. His silhouette, strong and imposing beneath the moonlight, his eyes found hers instantly, locking onto her with a magnetic intensity that made her heart race uncontrollably. "Alone?" he asked, his voice low, deliberate, carrying an edge of amusement. "Yes," she replied, her voice steady despite the rapid beat of her heart. "I needed space to think." Alaric stepped closer, the tension between them thick enough to cut with a knife. Space to think, or space to hide, his gaze softened ever so slightly. But the curiosity and command remained. Isabella drew in a shaky breath, both, perhaps, she admitted, unable to hide the vulnerability in her voice. Yet even as she spoke, she straightened her shoulders, refusing seem weak before him, especially then. "You have courage," he said finally. "And yet, there is more beneath the surface. Fear, yes, but also defiance." That combination is dangerous. Isabella's cheeks flushed. His words, his proximity, the intensity of his gaze, it all overwhelmed her in a way she had never experienced. And yet she could not retreat. Not now. Not when the moment felt so charged. "I don't want to be defined by anyone," she said quietly. "Not by Valeria, not by the pack, not even by you." Alaric's lips curved into a faint, just quiet, knowing smile. "Good. Defiance suits you." He stepped closer, the tension crackling like electricity between them. "But understand this, Isabella. In the pack, nothing is free. Every choice, every action carries consequences. And sometimes those consequences are not immediately visible." Her heart skipped. The danger in his words thrilled her as much as it terrified her. Something about Alaric's presence demanded both caution and surrender. And Isabella could feel herself teetering between the two. They began to walk through the grove together, silent save for the occasional rustle of leaves beneath their feet. The moonlight glinted off Alaric's features, highlighting the sharp lines of his jaw, the intensity of his eyes. Every step brought them closer, not just in proximity, but in an unspoken connection neither fully understood. "You intrigue me," he said at last, his voice barely above a whisper. Most omegas try to hide their strength, their fire. You embrace it, even when the world tries to crush you. Isabella's throat went dry. I can't afford to hide, she admitted, not if I want to survive. Alaric's gaze softened for a fleeting second, but the commanding edge returned. Then survive, he said simply. Remember, this path you walk is dangerous, not just from your stepsister, not just from whispers in the pack, but from forces you cannot yet see. Her pulse quickened at the weight of his words. Danger, desire, and power intertwined around them like invisible threads. Isabella knew that every choice, every moment, would pull her deeper into a web she could not yet fully comprehend. For the first time, she realized that her connection with the Alpha King was not just about attention or power. It was something more. Something that demanded trust, courage, and perhaps even surrender. And as they stood there, beneath the pale light of the moon, Isabella understood that the world she had known had shifted forever. The grove was silent, save for their breathing and the whisper of the wind. In that stillness, every unspoken word, every hidden thought seemed to bind them closer together, forging a bond that neither the pack nor Valeria could easily unravel, but in the shadows beyond the trees. Eyes watched, silent, patient, and calculating. Forces were already moving against her, plotting in secret, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Isabella's trials were only beginning, and the line between love, loyalty, and survival would soon blur beyond recognition. The forest was alive with whispers that Isabella could not yet understand. Leaves rustled like murmurs of secrets. Shadows stretched longer than they should. And the air itself seemed thick with tension. She had survived the morning's humiliation, endured the pack's whispers, and navigated the dangerous pull of the Alpha King's attention. But tonight, something felt different. The danger lurking in the undercurrents of the pack was no longer subtle. Since her secret encounter with Alaric in the grove, Isabella had sensed eyes on her in places she thought were private. Every glance from a pack member now carried suspicion. Every hushed conversation seemed to exclude her intentionally. And Valeria's smirk, subtle yet constant, reminded Isabella that her stepsister's schemes were far from over. As night fell, Isabella moved through the clearing toward the pack's common area. Her senses were heightened, her instincts sharp. Something in the air told her she was being watched, that she was now a piece in a game far bigger than she had realized. And she was right. From a shadowed corner, a figure observed her silently. The movements were deliberate, predatory, careful. Isabella's instincts prickled with unease, but she forced herself to stay calm. Walking as if unaware of the unseen eyes, in the Alpha King's territory, danger was always close, but the thrill of surviving it made her pulse race in a way she had never known. Alaric appeared beside her before she even noticed him, as if drawn by the same invisible currents she could feel in the forest. "You are aware," he said, his voice low and commanding, "that the pack is no longer what it seems. Trust is rare here, and loyalty even rarer. Someone is plotting, and it is not yet clear who." Isabella's eyes widened. "Plotting? Against me?" she asked, her voice trembling despite her attempt at calm. He shook his head. "Not just against you. Against the pack, against its order. You are caught in it because you are visible, because you have strength. And strength always attracts attention, sometimes deadly attention. Her heart pounded. She had thought her trials were only about surviving Valeria's jealousy and the pack's scrutiny, but this was far greater. Danger and intrigue had moved beyond whispers and rumors, reaching into something darker, more calculated. Alaric's gaze softened just slightly, before sharpening again with the intensity that seemed to make the forest itself hold its breath. You must be careful. Watch for signs. Listen to instincts. And remember, you are never truly alone, not while I am watching. Isabella's pulse quickened, caught between fear and something much more dangerous. Desire. The Alpha King's words, his presence, the subtle warmth of his attention. It all blurred the lines between caution and longing. Yet she knew that temptation in this dangerous game could be a fatal weakness. The night deepened, shadows curling around the edges of the clearing like silent predators. Isabella felt the weight of unseen eyes, the subtle shift of danger growing closer. Every rustle of leaves, every distant howl seemed amplified in her mind. This was no ordinary night. This was the beginning of a hunt. One where she was both prey and participant. Alaric's hand brushed against hers in a fleeting moment as they moved through the grove, a touch electric and commanding. Isabella felt a shiver run through her, a mixture of fear and anticipation. She understood now that the game was more than just surviving social politics or avoiding her stepsister's skeins. It was about power, trust, and the delicate balance between life and death within the pack. Remember this, Alaric said, his gaze holding hers with unyielding intensity. In this pack, nothing is simple, nothing is safe, and yet the bravest hearts often find their place amidst the chaos. I want to see if yours is strong enough. Isabella's breath caught. His words were both a warning and a promise. Danger lurked in every shadow. Betrayal could strike at any moment. And yet, the pull toward him, the magnetic, intoxicating connection, was undeniable. Her heart was a storm of adrenaline and desire, of fear and courage. As they reached the edge of the forest, Isabella realized that the real challenge had only just begun. A pack, the Alpha, their stepsister, and unseen enemies all were pieces in a dangerous game. And if she misstepped, the consequences could be devastating. But for the first time, she also realized something else. She was not powerless. Not anymore. The forest whispered secrets, the night held its breath, and Isabella felt the thrill of the dangerous game, knowing that survival would require not only strength, cunning, and courage, but also a heart capable of navigating love, desire, and betrayal. The forest was unusually still that evening, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath in anticipation of what was to come. Isabella moved carefully through the underbrush, each step deliberate, her senses alert to the faintest sound or movement. The events of the past days had sharpened her instincts. She no longer walked blindly into the pack's politics or her stepsister's schemes. She had learned that every whisper, every glance could conceal a threat. Valeria's machinations had grown bolder, and Isabella had begun to notice subtle clues, half-heard conversations, glances exchanged in secret. Movements that hinted at plotting. The realization hit her like a cold wind. Her stepsister had gone far beyond mere sabotage of the ceremony. Valeria's ambition threatened not only Isabella's place in the pack, but potentially the order and safety of everyone in it. Alaric, the Alpha King, had sensed the undercurrents long before she did. His eyes, ever vigilant, seemed to track not only her, but the faint traces of betrayal that lingered in the shadows. That evening, he found her in the grove, where they had met before, his presence a mixture of authority, protection, and the magnetic pull that both unsettled and fascinated her. "You've noticed," he said simply, his gaze darkening with concern. "Yes," Isabella admitted, her voice steady despite the tightness in her chest. "Valeria, she's planning something. I don't know all the details yet, but it's more than jealousy. It's calculated, dangerous." Alaric's expression hardened. "I feared as much. She has the cunning to manipulate the pack from behind the scenes. But cunning alone is not enough to hide the truth from those who watch closely." His hand brushed hers briefly. A fleeting connection that sent a shiver through her. "We must be careful. Every move, every word, every interaction is part of a larger game." The weight of his words pressed on Isabella, yet also steeled her resolve. She had been treated like a pawn, underestimated, dismissed, but no longer. She would uncover the betrayal. Piece by piece, and she would survive. As the night deepened, Isabella and Alaric moved silently through the trees, following a trail of subtle signs that only a keen eye could detect. Half-hidden marks on branches, discarded items that didn't belong, hushed murmurs carried on the wind, all pointed to Valeria's growing plot. Each discovery tightened the knot of tension in Isabella's chest. Her stepsister was clever, dangerous, and relentless, but Isabella could see the cracks forming in her facade. Finally, they reached a small clearing where the shadows seemed to move of their own accord. There, in the faint glow of the moon, Isabella caught the unmistakable glimmer of Valeria's hand in secret correspondence with someone outside the pack. Letters, messages, whispered promises of power, proof of betrayal beyond doubt. Isabella's heart raced. She had evidence, but confronting her stepsister directly would be dangerous. Valeria was cunning, and one wrong move could destroy everything Isabella had fought to protect. Yet she knew she could not ignore it. Alaric stepped closer, his presence a shield and a warning at once. "You do not have to face this alone," he said, his voice low and commanding, yet infused with an almost tender intensity. "We will uncover the full extent of her schemes. And when the time comes, she will answer for them." Isabella felt a surge of determination, bolstered by his words and by the unspoken bond that had grown between them. The forest seemed to press in around them, the air thick with danger and anticipation. Every rustle of leaves, every distant howl, was a reminder that the threat was very real and very close. "You think she's acting alone?" Isabella whispered, her voice tense. "But what if there are others? What if the betrayal runs deeper than we realize?" Alaric's eyes darkened, a storm of thought behind his piercing gaze. "Then we find them, and we make sure the pack. And you remain safe. Nothing will be allowed to harm you, Isabella. Not Valeria, Not anyone. I will see to that." Her heart thrummed at his words, a mixture of fear, gratitude, and something far more intoxicating. The line between danger and desire blurred as they stood together in the moonlit clearing, a silent pact forming between them. They would uncover the betrayal, navigate the treacherous currents of the pack, and survive the deadly game unfolding around them. But even as they prepared, Isabella felt a cold knot of dread. Someone was watching, always watching. Valeria was clever, but the shadows held secrets that even she could not control. The night was alive with unseen eyes, waiting for the perfect moment to strike, and Isabella knew, with a certainty that made her shiver, that the coming days would test every ounce of courage, cunning, and heart she possessed. The betrayal had been unveiled. The real game was just beginning. The tension in the pack's territory had reached a fevered pitch. Rumors of betrayal whispered through the trees, carried on the wind like poison, twisting the atmosphere into something sharp and electric. Isabella felt it in every glance cast her way, every subtle murmur she overheard. Yet beneath the anxiety, there was a new sensation growing inside her, a strange, thrilling certainty that her life was no longer hers alone to navigate. The Alpha King, Alaric, had entered her world fully, and nothing would ever be the same. The evening began in the clearing, where the pack gathered under the muted glow of the moon. The ceremony of the day seemed like a distant memory, replaced now by a far more pressing question. Who could be trusted? Isabella sensed the eyes of the pack upon her. Some curious, some wary, others calculating. But the most intense gaze, the one that made her pulse race and her breath catch, belonged to Alaric. He stood tall and commanding, his presence radiating control and authority. And yet there was a softness reserved only for her. "You have grown stronger," Alaric's voice finally cut through the whispers, low and deliberate, carrying the weight of power and command. "Stronger than I expected." Isabella, stronger than most would dare to be after betrayal and humiliation. Isabella's stomach fluttered with a mix of fear and exhilaration. "I have to be," she said softly. "There's no other choice." Alaric's eyes, dark and unreadable, lingered on her face. The silence that followed was charged with intensity. Then, decisively, he stepped forward, the air around him seeming to shift with his authority. "No one in this pack will harm you," he declared. His voice, resonating with authority, that silenced even the whispers of the pack. "Not your stepsister, not those who would plot against you, not even fate itself. From this moment, you are under my protection and under my claim." A collective gasp rippled through the pack. Eyes widened, some filled with shock, others with envy, but Isabella barely noticed. Her heart raced, her mind spinning with the weight of his words. The Alpha King's claim was a declaration not just of protection, but of power, desire, and destiny. It was binding, commanding, and intoxicating. Valeria's face paled, her smugness replaced by fury and disbelief. She had underestimated both Isabella and Alaric, and the realization hit her like a physical blow. Every carefully laid plan of humiliation and manipulation now seemed fragile and insufficient in the face of the Alpha's decisive action. Why? Isabella's mind whirled. This claim was more than she had ever imagined. It was a declaration of intent, of allegiance, and of something deeper she could not yet name. It was terrifying, thrilling, and overwhelming all at once. She could feel Alaric's power as tangibly as the night air around them, and with it, the weight of responsibility, expectation, and connection. Alaric extended his hand, his dark eyes holding hers with an intensity that left her breathless. "Will you walk this path with me?" "Isabella?" he asked, his voice low, compelling, impossible to ignore. "Not as a pawn, not as an omega to be overlooked, but as someone I see, as someone who matters. Will you trust me?" Isabella's pulse thundered. She had faced betrayal, whispered conspiracies, and humiliation. She had endured the pack's scrutiny and her stepsister's cruelty. And now, faced with the Alpha King's gaze, his claim, and the gravity of his words, she realized something. For the first time, she had a choice to step into her own power, to trust and to accept a bond that would change everything. Slowly, deliberately, she placed her hand in his. The contact sent a jolt of electricity through her body, a mixture of fear, courage, and something more intimate, more magnetic. I will," she whispered, her voice trembling but certain. Alaric's lips curved into a faint rap. Approving smile. "Good," he said. "Then we begin. Together." The pack watched, some in awe, others in envy, as the Alpha King's claim reshaped the dynamics of power and desire. Isabella felt the weight of every gaze, every whisper, yet for the first time she felt untouchable, not because she was invincible, but because she was no longer alone. She was seen, she was acknowledged, and she was beginning to understand the true depth of the connection with the Alpha King. As the night deepened, Isabella and Alaric stood together in the clearing, the shadows of the forest stretching long and dark around them. The world had shifted, and the dangerous game that had begun with betrayal now entered a new phase. One of strategy, loyalty, passion, and peril, and Isabella, standing hand in hand with the Alpha King, knew that the path ahead would test everything she was capable of, in ways she had never imagined. Somewhere in the darkness, unseen eyes watched. The game was far from over. Valeria was only the beginning, and the trials that awaited Isabella would demand courage, cunning, and a heart capable of surviving both love and treachery. But for now, under the silver glow of the moon and the protective shadow of the Alpha King, Isabella felt something she had never known before: power, purpose, and the first stirring of a bond that could withstand anything. The days that followed the Alpha King's claim over Isabella brought a whirlwind of changes to the pack. Whispers that once sought to undermine her now circled with caution as the pack began to sense the shift in power. Yet, with the declaration came new pressures, new dangers, and the quiet, unrelenting weight of expectation. Every glance at Isabella now carried curiosity, envy, or calculation, and every step she took seemed to carry the eyes of the Alpha himself, measuring her, testing her, pulling her into a web of unspoken connection. Isabella had never imagined that loyalty could feel so fragile, or that love could demand such courage. Valeria, still seething from humiliation and the Alpha's decisive action, prowled the periphery of every interaction, like a shadow waiting to strike. Her schemes grew more subtle, more dangerous, targeting the trust Isabella had begun to earn within the pack. Rumors whispered in the night. Attempts to isolate her, to paint her as undeserving of the Alpha's attention. Yet, through it all, Alaric remained close, a steady and commanding presence. He would appear beside her when danger seemed imminent. His voice calm but firm, guiding her with authority and quiet intensity. And though his proximity both thrilled and unsettled her, Isabella had begun to realize that the Alpha's interest was more than protective. It was magnetic, binding, and impossible to ignore. One evening, as the moon rose high over the forest, Isabella found herself alone in the grove once more. The quiet of the night should have been comforting. Yet her instincts prickled with unease. Every rustle of leaves seemed deliberate, every shadow a potential threat. Then, from the darkness, came the unmistakable presence of the Alpha. "You're on edge," Alaric observed. Stepping into the pale moonlight, his voice low and commanding. "Do you trust your instincts, Isabella?" She nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. I feel it. Someone is watching, planning something." Alaric's eyes darkened, the intensity of his gaze piercing her like a knife wrapped in velvet. "Then we prepare," he said. "But understand this. Loyalty in this pack is fragile, and love, even between two people, is tested by danger. You must be certain, Isabella. Certain of who you trust, and certain of your own strength." Her pulse quickened. Every word, every glance carried weight beyond the spoken. She felt the dangerous allure of the Alpha's proximity, a thrill and fear of being seen so completely, and yet the grounding power of his presence gave her courage she had never known. "I will not fail," she whispered. "Not the pack, not you, not myself." Alaric's expression softened ever so slightly, and for a fleeting moment, the commanding Alpha became a man who recognized not only her vulnerability, but her unyielding spirit. "Good," he murmured, stepping closer. The space between them crackled with unspoken tension. "Because soon, your courage will be tested more than ever, and your heart as well." The night deepened, and Isabella felt the weight of both fear and desire in equal measure. She knew that trust was fragile in this world, that loyalty could fracture under pressure, and that love, even her growing feelings for the Alpha, would be tested against schemes, envy, and hidden dangers she had yet to fully uncover. And then, a rustle in the underbrush shattered the quiet. Isabella turned sharply, instincts honed from days of careful observation now on high alert. Valeria emerged from the shadows, her expression carefully masked. Though a glimmer of malice betrayed her intentions. "Enjoying your new favor, Isabella?" Valeria's tone was sharp, venomous. "Don't think for a moment that this claim protects you from everything. There are forces in this pack you can't even imagine, and some of them are watching." Isabella's heart raced. Alaric's hand found hers, a grounding force amid the tension. "And we will face them," he said. Voice low, filled with a mixture of warning and promise. Together. The three of them stood in the moonlit grove, the air thick with unspoken threats, envy, and the electrifying tension between Isabella and the Alpha. The night seemed alive, the shadows heavy with secrets and danger, and Isabella knew with certainty that her loyalty to the pack, to herself, and to the Alpha would soon face trials that could break or define her. In that moment, standing beside Alaric, Isabella realized something profound. Love and loyalty were not simply gifts to be given. They were battles to be fought, choices to be made, and strengths to be proven in the face of envy, betrayal, and the hidden dangers lurking in the shadows of the pack. And as the forest whispered its secrets, and the moon cast silver light over the clearing, Isabella braced herself for the storm to come. Knowing that survival, power, and the heart she was beginning to give the Alpha would all be tested, and that nothing in the pack would ever be the same again. The night had deepened into a velvet darkness. The moon hidden behind drifting clouds, the pack's territory normally alive with rustling leaves and distant howls, seemed unnaturally still. Isabella moved cautiously along the edge of the forest, her senses heightened, every step deliberate. She had learned to trust her instincts, instincts that screamed danger, warning her that forces she could not yet see were moving against her and the Alpha King. Alaric had insisted she remain close. Yet he allowed her freedom to navigate her own strength. "You must learn to anticipate threats before they come," he had told her earlier, his commanding presence both reassuring and electrifying. The pack is not always what it seems. Loyalty is fragile, and betrayal can hide behind the most familiar faces. Those words haunted her now, the whispers she had dismissed as jealousy, the half-hidden glances from pack members, and Valeria's constant scheming were threads in a larger tapestry. One that Isabella had yet to fully unravel, but the instinct to survive and to protect the Alpha who had claimed her drove her forward through the shadows. As she approached a secluded clearing, a faint crackle of movement caught her attention. Her heart leapt, adrenaline sharpening every sense. From the darkness, figures emerged. Wolves she had trusted, speaking in hushed tones to a stranger whose presence exuded menace. Papers, small artifacts, and whispered plans hinted at a conspiracy far more dangerous than mere envy. The pack, Isabella realized, was in danger. And worse, someone intended to strike a deadly blow that would shake the entire hierarchy. She gasped softly, instinctively ducking behind a cluster of ferns. Alaric's voice, low and commanding, came from behind her, yet with a whisper that sent shivers down her spine. "I see it. You found them." She turned to him, relief mingling with fear. "It's worse than I imagined," she whispered. "They're planning something catastrophic. I don't know what exactly, but it's beyond betrayal. It's criminal." Alaric's eyes darkened, his jaw tightening as he observed the shadowy figures plotting in the distance. "This confirms my suspicion," he murmured. "The threat is real, and it's closer than we thought." We must act carefully but decisively. Isabella felt her pulse quicken, torn between fear and exhilaration. Danger had never felt so immediate, yet the thrill of being at the heart of the pack's survival. And at Alaric's side was intoxicating. "What should we do?" she asked, her voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. "We observe," he said, his gaze intense. "We gather proof, and when the moment is right, we strike." But Isabella, You must be ready. This conspiracy is calculated. It will not be easy to unravel, and someone may be willing to kill to protect it. The forest seemed to tighten around them. The shadows curling like serpents ready to strike. Every rustle of leaves, every faint snap of a twig heightened the tension. Isabella felt the weight of responsibility pressing down upon her, not just for herself, but for the Alpha, the pack, and the fragile bond they were forging. Hours passed in tense silence as they watched from the shadows. Isabella's sharp eyes caught small details others would have missed, the way a pack member hesitated before speaking. The subtle signals of warning passed between conspirators, the coded gestures that hinted at an alliance formed in secrecy. Each observation added another piece to the puzzle, building a picture of danger that chilled her to the bone. Finally, Alaric's deep voice broke the silence. The time is near. They believe themselves hidden, untouchable. But we have seen too much. Tonight, the web of their deception begins to unravel. Isabella felt a thrill that mingled fear and excitement. The stakes were higher than ever. The conspirators were clever, dangerous, and desperate. One misstep could cost lives, including hers. Yet as Alaric's hand brushed hers in a fleeting, grounding touch, she knew that together they could confront the darkness. The night's shadows whispered of secrets, lies, and plots, but Isabella felt something else as well. The undeniable, intoxicating pull of the Alpha King's presence. Danger and desire coiled together like twin serpents, electrifying the air around them. And in that moment, Isabella realized that surviving the conspiracy would require not only courage and cunning, but also the heart to trust in the bond they were forging, one that could either protect them or destroy them. The hour of reckoning was near, and as the hidden figures in the clearing moved with deadly intent, Isabella took a deep breath. Tonight, the dangerous game would escalate, and the pack would face threats that could no longer be ignored. Survival, justice, and the future of the Alpha's claim hung in the balance. And Isabella was determined to fight, no matter the cost. The night hung thick and heavy over the pack's territory, the moon hidden behind a veil of clouds, casting shadows that shifted and twisted like living creatures. Isabella's heart raced as she moved silently beside Alaric, each step measured, every sense sharpened. Tonight was the night they would confront the conspiracy, the night that could determine the fate of the pack. And her own life. The clearing where the conspirators had been observed earlier was empty, save for the rustling of leaves and the distant calls of nocturnal creatures. Yet Isabella knew better than to let appearances deceive her. Danger lingered in every shadow, and betrayal had proven time and again that it could strike when least expected. Alaric's presence beside her was commanding, protective, and yet electrifying in a way that made her pulse race. He moved like a predator, eyes scanning the darkness, muscles taut with controlled power. "Stay close," he whispered, his voice low, resonant, and impossibly intimate. "Tonight, we confront the danger directly. But be ready. The conspirators are clever, desperate, and willing to do anything to protect their secrets." Isabella nodded, her own determination hardening. She had survived humiliation, the pack's scrutiny, and her stepsister's schemes. Now, she would survive this, and beside Alaric, she felt a strength she had never known before, a courage that came not only from instinct, but from the bond between them. Through the shadows, they observed the conspirators at last. Figures moved with hushed urgency, carrying tools, papers, and whispers of plans that could destabilize the Thys. One figure stood out, a man cloaked in darkness, his movements precise, calculated, and chillingly confident. This was the mastermind, the architect of the schemes that threatened everything Isabella had begun to fight for. Scene 2. Alaric's eyes darkened, his jaw tightening as he studied the figure. "There," he said, voice low and dangerous. "That is the one. The rest follow him. He will be our target." The tension coiled tightly in Isabella's chest. But she refused to step back. She had grown stronger, braver, and sharper. And tonight, she would prove it, not only to the pack, but to herself. Alaric moved forward, silent and deadly, this commanding presence radiating authority that made the conspirators' confidence waver. Isabella followed, her steps cautious yet determined, each heartbeat a drum of anticipation and fear. The forest seemed to hold its breath, every shadow a potential threat, every whisper a sign of hidden danger. As they approached the mastermind, the man sensed them. His eyes flicked toward the shadows, sharp and calculating. "So," he said, his voice smooth, "dangerous. The Alpha comes to play detective, and he brings the Omega who caught my little plans." Alaric's lips curved into a faint, dangerous smile. "You've underestimated the pack," he said, "and you've underestimated her." His gaze swept to Isabella, and she felt a surge of confidence and courage under the intensity of his attention. "You wanted chaos, but you will find only justice." The confrontation escalated quickly. The mastermind lunged, attempting to flee into the shadows, but Alaric's power was overwhelming, with a controlled, predatory grace. He blocked every escape, guiding Isabella to observe and learn. Every movement, every command was precise, teaching her that strength was not only in fighting, but in strategy, anticipation, and presence. Isabella felt a rush of adrenaline and awe. She had never felt so alive, so needed, and so intensely aware of her own growing power. When the mastermind tried to manipulate others to shield him, she whispered a warning to Alaric. Her instincts sharp, her mind focused. "He's setting a trap," she said, her voice low but steady. Alaric's eyes flicked to hers, a brief flicker of pride shining through his intensity. "Good. Stay alert." His hand brushed hers as he moved. A fleeting connection that sent sparks of fear and desire through her. Together, they cornered the mastermind, isolating him from any possible allies. The struggle was tense, calculated, and ultimately decisive. With Alaric's commanding presence and Isabella's sharp instincts, they subdued the conspirator, preventing disaster for the pack. The man was captured, his schemes exposed, and the shadows that had threatened the forest began to dissipate. As the adrenaline faded, Isabella realized the depth of what had just occurred. Danger, courage, and strategy had combined into a moment that tested every ounce of her strength. And through it all, the connection between her and Alaric had deepened, an unspoken bond forged in the heat of confrontation, trust, and the shared thrill of survival. Alaric's gaze held hers, a mixture of approval, admiration, and something far more intimate. "You did well," he said, his voice low, resonant, and heavy with emotion. Brave, smart, and unyielding. That is why I chose you. Isabella's heart flooded in her chest. A mixture of exhaustion, pride, and the undeniable pull of desire. The mastermind had been captured, the immediate danger quelled, but the night had left an indelible mark on her spirit. She had faced fear, stood beside the Alpha King, and proven herself in ways that would change the pack forever. And as the forest settled into an uneasy calm, Isabella knew that though the conspirator was captured, the game was far from over. The pack's secrets, desires, and hidden dangers would continue to challenge her. But for the first time, she felt ready. With Alaric beside her and the bond they shared growing stronger, she understood that survival and perhaps even love was now within reach. The first rays of dawn filtered through the forest, casting a soft golden glow over the pack's territory. The night's shadows, thick with schemes, danger, and whispered secrets, had finally lifted. The conspiracy that had threatened the balance of the pack and Isabella's very life was now unraveling under the firm hand of the Alpha King. Yet even in the early light, the air was still heavy with tension, reminders that survival had been hard won and that every triumph carried its own price. Isabella moved quietly through the clearing. Her steps measured but confident. The events of the past days, humiliation, betrayal, secret encounters, dangerous plots, and confrontations had sharpened her mind, strengthened her resolve, and transformed her in ways she had never imagined. She had learned to trust her instincts, to face danger head-on, and to navigate the delicate, treacherous currents of pack politics. Alaric appeared beside her, silent and commanding, his presence as formidable as the first time she had felt his gaze upon her. But now there was also an unmistakable warmth, a protective force that had grown between them with every shared danger, every whispered warning, and every fleeting touch. "The mastermind is captured," Alaric said, his voice low but filled with authority. "His schemes are exposed, justice will be served, and the pack will know peace again." Isabella nodded, feeling a surge of relief and triumph. Yet even as the threat receded, she knew the victory had not come without lessons. Strength alone had not been enough. Courage, cunning, loyalty, and the ability to trust, especially in the Alpha, had been essential. She had survived. But more importantly, she had grown. As they approached the center of the pack, the conspirator was brought forward, restrained, and faced the gathered wolves. Murmurs rippled through the pack. Shock, fear, relief. But Isabella's eyes were fixed on the man who had orchestrated chaos, who had threatened the lives of so many. His defiance faltered under the weight of exposure, and even in his final moments of resistance, he could not hide the inevitability of justice. Alaric's command echoed through the clearing, firm and unyielding. "You have threatened the pack, endangered its members, and betrayed the trust that binds us. Justice will be carried out. You will answer for your crimes." The conspirator's lips twisted in a futile smirk, but the fear in his eyes betrayed him. Isabella's heart raced, a mixture of adrenaline, satisfaction, and lingering tension. It had been a long road to this moment, a path through danger, betrayal, and intrigue. But at last, the darkness had been confronted, and the pack could breathe again. Alaric's gaze found hers, dark and intense, pulling her attention from the criminal to the man who had claimed not only the pack, but her as well. "You were extraordinary tonight," he said, his voice low and resonant. "Brave, intelligent, and unyielding. You have proven yourself worthy of not only survival, but of trust, loyalty, and more." Isabella felt heat rise to her cheeks, and her heart thudded in her chest. The Alpha King's praise. His attention, the bond they had forged through danger and desire. It was overwhelming, intoxicating, and undeniable. "You mean you trust me?" she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. Alaric's lips curved into a faint, approving smile. "I trust you with my pack, with the balance of this territory, and with myself." His hand reached for hers, fingers intertwining with a strength that sent shivers through her. "And now that the threat is neutralized, it is time to look forward. Together." Isabella's breath caught. Together, the word carried a weight she had longed for, but never dared to hope for. In the Alpha King's eyes, she saw not just power and authority, but admiration, desire, and the promise of something enduring. As the sun rose fully, bathing the clearing in warm light, Isabella and Alaric stood side by side, united in triumph and connection. Valeria, stripped of power and influence, retreated into the shadows, defeated but alive, a reminder that ambition unchecked can lead to ruin. The pack members, witnessing the resolution and the bond between the Alpha and Isabella, began to realign themselves, whispers now tinged with respect rather than envy. The forest itself seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. The danger had passed, the conspiracies had been unraveled, and the Alpha King's claim had brought not only justice, but balance. Loyalty and the beginning of love. Isabella felt a weight lift from her chest. The culmination of trials, betrayal, and danger, now replaced by a sense of belonging, strength, and purpose. Alaric leaned closer, his lips brushing her temple, his voice a low rumble against her skin. "You have changed this pack forever, Isabella, and you have changed me as well." Her heart swelled, a mixture of triumph, relief, and the heady pull of desire. "And you've changed me," she whispered. "You've given me strength and a place where I belong." The Alpha King's hand tightened around hers, firm and protective. "Then let us walk this path together," he said, his tone both a command and a promise. "Through danger, love, and loyalty, we are stronger united, and nothing, not betrayal, not schemers, not even fate itself can undo that." As they stood together in the golden light of dawn, the pack behind them and the forest alive with quiet whispers of survival and triumph, Isabella realized that the trials had forged more than courage. They had forged destiny. She was no longer just an Omega who had been overlooked or betrayed. She was a woman who had faced danger, claimed her power, and stood beside the Alpha King, bound in loyalty, love, and the promise of a future they would face together. The forest echoed with the soft murmurs of the pack. A rising sun illuminating hope, victory, and the enduring strength of trust. Isabella took a deep breath, her heart full, and stepped forward beside Alaric. Together, they had survived, conquered, and claimed the future. One filled with love, justice, and the thrill of a bond that could withstand anything. The shadows were gone, the conspirator captured, and the pack safe. Yet Isabella knew the most important battles. The battles of the heart, loyalty, and courage had only made her stronger. And with the Alpha King by her side, she was ready for whatever destiny had in store. The story had reached its climax. Justice had been served, and love had found its rightful place. The Pack's territory and their hearts would never be the same again.